Welcome to Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. Join Toby Malone and TJ Young, along with some special friends, as we puzzle our way through what we once thought was an unreadable book to produce a surprisingly listenable podcast. It is Sunday, October 13th, 2024. It has been 149 days since we have started reading, with 399 pages complete of 628, meaning we have 229 pages left to go, and a 63.54% and 2 whole books of the way through Finnegans Wake. Welcome to episode 27 of Wake, the podcast that remains even further on than anyone thought it would go, turning purists into wakeists, one at a time, as we go about fulfilling a long-held bucket list item, reading James Joyce's Finnegans Wake out loud just once. I'm your host, Toby Malone, joined once more by the man who never wrote a light and easy play in his life, my co-host, TJ Young. Hi, TJ.
Hi, you are so right. And, I'm pretty sure I told you, but the first play I ever wrote was definitely a rip-off of Death of a Salesman.
Oh.
And it had a guy finding out he's about to get fired from his job and then going to a park bench and taking way too many sleeping pills and then hallucinating about 3 events where he, should have helped people but didn't. It was too much. You're right. One day I said one day I would write the happy play. I don't think that
I don't think it's coming. I mean, yeah. I mean, this is a carryover from the conversation we were having prior to hitting record. I think if you were to start writing happy plays, then we'd all start worrying about you. They say, wait, where are you putting all the angst?
No, in all fairness, I do write comedies, although it is fair to describe my plays as funny until they're not. So
no, fair enough. And I can't really criticize. I wrote a play about a butt plug once, so
I love that play so much.
I do too. I got to get that play out there somewhere. Anyone who's interested in knowing about that play or all of TJ's plays, join us on New Play Exchange, where you can see all of our works.
Very true.
So yes, we are here in the recap of Book 2. We are nearly 400 pages into Wake, and we did a recap of the last book. So this novel is broken up into 4 books or 4 sections. We're calling it Book 2. It could be Section 2 or Part 2, I guess. But yes, we'd like to do this as a recap, and we'll see what we see. I will say before we get started, I want to do a little public mea culpa in that I was telling TJ this earlier, in that we've recorded 26 episodes prior to now. And up until now, I've been producing these episodes. And every time I'd put them through, I'd think, TJ sounds great. The guest sounds great. I sound like I'm at the bottom of a well. And I don't know why. And so I thought, hey, why don't I check the settings on our recording app to see what's going on with the audio, and it turns out that I had not set my audio to be picked up by my microphone, but instead to be picked up by my laptop microphone, which is a foot away from me. So the microphone that I've been speaking into has been doing exactly nothing, which probably explains why the sound has been poor. So I apologize for that. This shows just how slapdash this operation really is.
You know what? I also, before we begin, I want to give us a little bit more credit than 399 pages, because technically Book 3, the first words of Book 3 outside of the 3 Roman numerals, start on page 403.
403, yes. We're getting closer. We haven't read pages 400.
No, we have not read the blank pages.
That's right. So they count. The purists will get on us. If the purists come and say, actually, you have not read 402 pages because I didn't hear you say I. So, yeah. we need to log it by saying blank page inserted here.
Yeah. Know that those people, they can find me and they can fight me, and it's fine. I have a feeling I will win.
We keep talking about these nasty purists, and I still haven't met one. And I'm starting to wonder if they actually exist. I'm sure they exist somewhere. I'm sure in a university somewhere there is some high-minded Joycean out there who takes this far too seriously.
Oh yeah. I mean, someone's writing their dissertation and their thesis on this book right now. We know
Mm-hmm.
this for a fact, right? And if they stumble, they they might reference our podcast in their paper. Who knows? One day, because there's so many. You know, they'll be like, "Hey, there's one podcast that completed this book all the way through.
Mm-hmm.
It is
Yes.
this one."
Well, there have been other podcasts that have talked about
They
this,
don't count.
but they all stop. They all
Yeah.
stop. So there's a couple. There's one that was recorded a few years ago, but it finishes after the music room. Like they're trying to do bite-size analysis and things like that, and I think they managed to get 19 or 20 episodes in, but they only got as far as the music room. So and then they stopped for whatever reason. I'm not sure. Some people stop because they get bored, or because they find it too overwhelming, or they get busy, or they get a cease and desist letter. I don't know. But and then there are other ones, and then there's the So there are other podcasts, but we maybe will have the distinction of going further than anyone else has gone. I don't know. I mean, I remember when I was doing my PhD, I took Shakespeare. I was doing my PhD on Shakespearean performance adaptation and textual analysis in like 19th century performance, and I took that very seriously, very, very seriously. And so Shakespeare, you couldn't joke with me about Shakespeare much. So I know that there are the purists are out there who want us to do right by Joyce, but I feel like we are. I feel as though we are very much in the cheerleading corner now
Oh yeah.
of Joyce, and we're finding a really nice community, particularly on Instagram. Lots of really interesting book people who are following us now, including one person who I don't know the name of because their Instagram is under a pseudonym, but they are doing their PhD on sleep in modernist novels at the University of Kent in the UK, and I reached out to them and said, "Hey, your research sounds interesting. Come on the podcast." And they said, "Oh, well, I'm still doing some research, but maybe later in the year." So we might get that person, this anonymous person, to come and join us, which will be very interesting and fun to hear a little bit of a academic perspective, even though we're not that much interested in, the purists of it all.
Yeah, true. But I think that it is interesting when you address or confront something out of wonder and fun, as
Mm.
opposed to from an academic standpoint. Um, it's safe. We are both academics, but I also think that we're both academics who realize, like, at the end of the day, like, we're talking about books. Like, and we're not curing cancer, and we're not sending people to the moon to start a new colony. So, like, it's all okay.
Yeah.
But there is that time where man, come come to me about queer theory when I
Mm-hmm.
was in grad school, or like African American theater, and I was like, wow. And I'm all like, yeah, think what you
Yeah.
want. Like, I have my thoughts, I have my opinions.
Well, it's an affectation of youth quite often. That sort of taking something so seriously that you're not seeing it with that wonder, and so I'd like to think that we are getting enough of a pass based on the fact that we are approaching this in good faith, as opposed to just making fun of it. And I think if we had an expert on, and then we were to say, "What did you get out of that chapter?" And we were to say, "Well, I like this part where he describes a fart, and this one, this silly word made me laugh, and this one sounded dirty."
So,
The purists would probably roll their eyes and go, "Yes, yes, okay," but it's all in there, so it's not as though we're saying
100%.
things that don't exist.
Yeah. And it's funny because I realized this a couple weeks ago, that for a while I was like, man, this is like my first deep interaction with modernist literature. And then I remember I took a class in undergrad where I read the complete works of Camus. So
Mm, right.
at which point
We've
in
been
time I was
there.
like, I get it. We are the strangers. I get it.
Right.
We are the like, Um but and it was really a colleague who brought this book up and said, "Have you read anything else?" She was like, "What? Do you like Kafka? Do you like Camus?" I was like,
Mhm.
was like, I do. And she was like, you're a modernist. And I was like,
Yeah.
what? What? And I had never thought of myself as that. And then I think about it, I was all like, I guess I am.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, I mean, it's a pretty
I love Skin of Our Teeth, and I'm
right.
like, I
Yeah.
love the Metamorphosis. I'm like,
yeah. Well, it's a broad category, and there was a lot going on during that time. I mean, during the time when, I mean, that's bleeding into absurdism and bleeding into a lot of the reactions to the end of the First World War or what was going on, and so it's sort of no surprise that Joyce was doing what he was doing, given the state of the world and what Sartre was doing, and UNESCO and the Russians. Geez, all the Russians.
Oh, the Russians.
Yeah, I mean, I'm in a reading group at the moment where which came to us through the Wake Instagram, where we're reading The Master and Margarita, which is Mikhail Bulgakov, which I've read before. I read maybe 15 years ago, but I don't think I didn't retain anything. And it's a classic, an absolute classic. It wasn't published properly in full until the 1960s, but it was written at exactly the same time that Joyce was writing The Wake, and he finished writing. He's finished writing it right around 1940, and then he died. But the process of writing Master and Margarita for Bulgakov was really fraught because he was one of Stalin's favorite playwrights, so he kind of got a pass. He wasn't disappeared like a lot of these guys, but they all lived in fear that they were going to. And so he wrote this book about the devil coming to Moscow, and the devil shows up in Moscow and causes chaos with his cadre of demons, including a nude harpy and a demon and a giant human-sized cat, and they cause chaos throughout Moscow and fool everyone just to see. And the idea is, if there is good in the world, there must be evil, and so he's testing that theory, but also because Russia at the time was an atheist country, the idea of him saying if there is a devil, there must be a god, and that was the sort of thing that got you sent to Siberia or killed. And so he used to regularly write his manuscript out, and then when the heat would get too high, he would burn his manuscripts, but would have memorized the text, and then would rewrite it.
Oh, wow.
Write it out again, and then write it out again. And so the version that has come down to us has been rewritten 3 or 4 times. And so so Bulgakov is maybe not. I mean, he sort of fits within modernism, but it's a little late. But yeah, I mean, the world is always going to impact these things, and while it's a very different kind of text to The Wake, I think reading The Wake in tandem with The Master and Margarita has been a really instructive experience, because it's very light and very accessible and very funny. And again, I don't think when I read it 15 years ago, I don't think I was ready to read it, and now it's really landing. So that's my recommendation for the week.
Yeah, I love the idea of, I'm like, I should read T.S. Eliot again. I know he's late modernism, but like, I'm about it. I loved him then, but like, even just thinking about, I don't think I told you this, like a year and a half ago, I interacted with a new adaptation of six characters in search of an author,
right?
And I forgot how much I love that play.
Yeah.
And then I was like, yeah, I guess I am a modernist. But it's funny because I don't know if I could write in the style of modernism. And I think mostly because it's like the things that are going on in the world today and are almost consistent and overwhelming access to knowledge and information makes me feel like to wax poetic is a waste of time is not the right word, but like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, I mean, it's all that reflexive stuff. It's all sort of really reflecting back on the reader, back on the audience. I do love six characters in search of an author. I preferred Right You Are If You Think You Are. I don't know if you know that one, which is another crazy one, which very much, sort of, it's a very cyclical argument based kind of play, but it does also incorporates the audience a lot, and I remember being very fond of that one. And Enrico Cat as well. He was about the man who thinks he's King Henry IV, and all of the guards who are employed to pretend to be the guards of the king, but really he's crazy.
Yes.
Remember that one? Yeah.
Yes, I do.
Or Henry IV is so often called. There's some really interesting things about these creators who are pushing the boundaries around and just sort of seeing how, like, one of the episodes we just recorded was talking about, you set in the bar with all of the cacophony of noise and just the idea of recording that and putting it down and realizing that it's almost impossible to pass as a reader, but that's not the point. The point is that it's that recording. It's the experiment that he's undertaking.
Yeah.
It's so interesting.
The idea of, what W.B. Yeats said about modernism, like what things fall apart. It's really about the cascading of this, where we're searching for a center, but everything else falls apart around it.
Mm-hmm.
And that idea of, let's just roll into talking about the book. But like, even just the idea of near the end of 2-3,
yeah,
right? We had that conversation about, like, it feels like you're hearing all these different conversations, but all smashed up in this one paragraph, where the way that we have been taught to analyze literature is like, if this is all one paragraph, that means it's supposed, like, it is all one linked thought, usually by one you know what I mean?
Right.
And so when we get to a paragraph that is not that, and it's 7 pages long, and it's breaking the rules, and the center of it is us being like, and whose point of view, whose thoughts are we holding? But he doesn't let us sit on that.
No, he doesn't, because he then jumps straight over to the story of Tristan and Isolde, with and you, just when you think you kind of have a little bit of a handle on where we're at, he spins you into another thing, which is, and that's a similar thing. And not that Bulgakov, because obviously Joyce didn't read Bulgakov. I mean, Joyce probably knew about Bulgakov's other stuff, but the Master and Margarita does that same thing, and it's really interesting. And I know this is a useless tangent, but it's so curious in that the first scene in Master and Margarita is set at Patriarch Ponds in Moscow, where these two, a musician and a poet, not a musician, he's a publisher and a poet. I call him a musician because he's named Berlioz, and they make it very clear that he's not the composer. But these two people are talking to each other, and they encounter this strange man who says these very. He basically predicts the future. He says, "Berlioz, I know you. You're going to die by being decapitated because of the olive oil." And he's also something along those lines. And he's like, "Oh, this crazy man, I'm going to leave. I'm going to go get the police." And then he ends up slipping in some olive oil and tripping and getting his head cut off by a streetcar right there. And it's the devil who is making these predictions. And so you kind of get this sense of like, oh, there's this relationship between these two people, and the devil is there, and we're going to find out more about the devil. And then, and the reason why they have this conversation is that these two people are talking about how Jesus Christ never existed. He is a fictional character, and if he never existed, that, what else didn't exist? And this man comes up and says, "Excuse me, are you saying that Jesus Christ never existed?" And they say, "Yeah." He's like, "Well, of course he existed. I was there when he was executed." And they're like, "What? You're a crazy man." He's like, "No." And he's like, "Oh, well, Pilate said." They're like, "Pilate, I was there when Pilate condemned Jesus. Actually, it was I was in the room." And then, "Well, that was thousands of years ago, so you're a crazy person." And then the devil, and then Berlioz dies, and then the devil says, "It was a hot and dusty day." And then the beginning of the very next chapter says it was a hot and dusty day, and you've gone back 2,000 years, and now you're in Pilate's palace, and it tells the story of Pilate condemning Jesus to die. And so in the second chapter of this book, Bulgakov says, you think you're getting a story about the devil. Now I'm going to go back and tell you a story about the crucifixion of Christ. And this, the audacity of that being chapter 2,
Right.
not 100 pages in once we trust you. And this is going a long way around just to say that it really feels like Joyce is doing a similar kind of thing to say, you're not in charge here.
God, night lessons.
Oh yes, night lessons. So let's get into it a little bit. This is an unusual episode of Wake. Like previously, I said there's no reading this week, but we're going to have a really brief discussion on getting to the end of book 2. Our first recapped episode ended up being one of our most popular episodes yet in terms of listenership, which
they said we ain't got to listen to the whole thing,
which isn't surprising. It was like, whoa, there's a recap, sweet. So we were the Coles Notes of podcasts that week. We shouldn't be that surprised. I think if anyone has a chance to listen to a recap instead of slogging through chapter by chapter, then that's what they're going to do. They are probably disappointed in that we don't actually give them any insight into those chapters. We're mostly just talking about, modernism and other books that we're interested in. But it's but hopefully this one is helpful in some ways. Either that, or you can just listen to our dulcet tones and enjoy us hanging out with each other. So book 2 was a whole different beast to book 1.
Yes. I say this. Book 1, I was like, okay, it's a little cheeky, but I'm okay with it because it's like cheeky with adults, right? Book 2, especially book 2-1, I was like, this is cheeky, but with teenagers, and I don't know. It's like the same reason why I never watched any of those CW Archie shows or whatever it's called. Because I was like, I don't need to see 16-year-olds making out of the back of the car.
Right.
Like, I'm fine.
Yeah. And then, and you get the summaries like they get to choose they get to guess the color of their sister's underwear, and you're like,
like, do they have to?
Yeah. Is it get to or have to or something like that?
Yeah.
Yeah. So so if book 1 was the book of the parents, then of HC and ALP, and it was a lot about rumor, and it really felt like backstory.
Yeah,
really felt like sort of getting us sort of the laying some track. Book 2 is the book of the children, and that's something that that I didn't come up with. That's illustrated in a diagram that I came across by László Moholy-Nagy in Richard Kostelanet's Essaying Essays, Alternative Forms of Exposition, that was published by Out of London Press in 1975. And so obviously as a audio medium, this is going to be frustrating 10 minutes for anyone who's listening. But I strongly recommend that you go to either our Patreon to check out the diagram, or go to our Instagram. We also will have it there. So TJ, you can see the diagram in front of you. It's in the document. And so we've got. So how do we describe this diagram?
It's a series of concentric circles going out in the way that one would picture the rings of hell from Dante's Inferno,
right?
With rays actually piercing through from the center. James Joyce insignated a circle to also give greater themes and ideas, and then on the side actually talking about each of the members of HCE's family, HCE, ALP, Izzy, Jerry, and Kevin, their relationship to each other, their history with each other, and then how they are. This is crazy. Like the biblical references that they have to each other, the mythological references that they have, the literary references, the allegorical references, their narrative function. Like it's really great because I'm actually like actively talking about I use non-realistic as a general term, but non-realistic storytelling, anything that's not Freytag's pyramid, and like how do you visualize that in the same way that you would visualize Freytag's pyramid. And I was like, you could do this, but it feels like someone said, I need to figure out the structure of this to make sense of it. And I think that this is actually pretty darn cool.
Yeah, and it's one of those diagrams that the more you look at it, the more you get from it, and I always get something new every time I look at it. We have these concentric circles that you talk about, and each of these concentric circles, there are 4 of them. Each of one can corresponding to one of the books, and so book 1 is called the parents, book 2 is called the children, which, like I mentioned before, book 3, which we're going to get to, is called the people, and book 4 is called return, called in this sense. But then if you go further around the circles, we have also different things that are connected. So, so book 1, just going all the way around, this in terms of how it's defined by the cycle, it's is that humanism? No,
it says animism.
Animism, not humanism is something whole different. So animism, cycle 1, cycle 2 is aristocracy, cycle 3 democracy, cycle 4 anarchy. Again, these things that we don't necessarily understand, but things that you look at and you think, oh, okay. On one side, on the right-hand side, book 1 is the Dark Ages, book 2 is fable, book 3 is history, book 4 is vernacular. Or on the left-hand side, book 1 is birth, book 2 is conflict, book 3 is death, book 4 is resurrection. So these circles sort of are ways of not only sort of understanding the allegory that runs throughout each of these books, but also being able to look at the different representations that HCE and ALP and the kids have in different kinds of ways: familial, historical, legendary, mythological, cabalistic, biblical, symbolic, linguistic. It's fascinating, and it's one of those. And then these radiating lines that go through that sort of suggest that these are constants throughout each book, talking about the rise or the wake or different kinds of things like the 12, and there's references to 12 from time to time, and then it says the 12, which refers to the 12 months, the 12 zodiac signs, also 12 jurors, and it suggests the thunder word that goes all the way through is the voice of God. Yeah, I mean, it's one of these things where we try so hard to sound like we know what we're talking about, and then we come across something like this and we go, this feels a lot like, I don't know if you've got to see that link there to that Instagram under there, TJ, but there's a link where someone has taken this chart and
pretty great.
So someone's taken the chart and they've so there's a Instagram account that we follow that I love. I don't know if it's still active, called real_Finnegans_wake. Go follow them because it's a meme it's a meme account all about Finnegans Wake, and the depth of connection is kind of astonishing. And so they've taken this chart and they've put it in front of Charlie Day from It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but given him an eye patch, so he's Joyce.
I am dying at the one that he has of the chart from Night Lessons,
right?
That is supposed to be of the female anatomy, and it's
yes.
to Adam Levine, and it just says a lot of expletives, but it says that body of yours is absurd.
It's right, yeah.
So good.
Yeah, he also uses a lot of Wordle by sticking in all of the words from the Wake into Wordle. Yeah, lots of really fun stuff in there. So worth checking that out with all the different.
That's so good.
Yeah, so I don't want to spend too long on visual jokes while we're on an audio medium, but
I will say real quick, like there's lots of things in here that I have used to like analyze literature before, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like looking at the allegories that they might hold, or how the historical references, all those other things, what myths that they might be related to. But being able to be like, this story boils down to a cabalistic sort of idea of Adam and Eve and their children. It's like, that's crazy. But also, is he as Lilith, which the perception of Lilith in contemporary times is really complicated.
Yes.
So,
yeah, there's I mean, legendary with Finn McCool. So HCE really is everyone. HCE is Earwicker, but he's Finn McCool, Osiris, Adam, St. Patrick. But autobiographical, that's another interesting one, because HCE as Joyce, and ALP as his mother and his wife, which
Yeah.
Joyce's daughter, Lucia, and but then Jerry is also Joyce again, and Kevin is Stanislaus, his brother, and then we have the symbols along the top. Remember that was from Night Lessons. Remember the symbol family with the upside down E and the triangle and the square, which we incorporated just by describing them. But that's also, and I've seen people with that as their tattoo, with just the
Ain't gonna be me. I'm gonna say I'm gonna say that deeply.
symbols. Yeah. You don't want the Earwicker family written on your body.
Not for anything, you know.
No.
But you know, I will say the first book felt like dipping your toes into the pool so that way you understand what the temperature's like.
Mm-hmm.
And then the second book felt like Joyce was at the thermostat being like, you got comfortable, didn't you?
Yeah.
know?
Yeah, I kind of felt like we were looking forward to book 2 because we were like, oh, there's stuff in here. There's interesting columns and there's going to be all this sort of stuff. But it did turn into a bit of a slog at times.
Yeah.
And so going through the children, through Fable, like it comes in this conflict, the aristocracy from this chart. What's your overall take? I mean, so in terms of the chapters, we had 2-1, which was Night Games, 2-2, Night Lessons, 2-3, Tales at the End, and 2-4 was Tristan and Isolde.
Yeah. You know, being able to look at them or think about them in that order, in that context, it really felt like the children were here to provide stakes. I have no other words for it, right? Like the innocence of children showing up, but not only in the fact that they are still beholden to the wants and desires of their parents, right? You know, ALP is like, come in and freaking learn. Like, stop this game, come in and learn. Mm-hmm. But at the same time, it almost felt like, at least for me, like the foolishness of HCE and all the philandering that they say he's done and everything like that also still rolls down into his kids, right? Like, you know, that sort of sexual exploration. It's like, yeah, apple tree, not fall too far. But it also felt like the kids had way more structure around their lives, right? Where they're playing games with each other. They're putting on plays, and then they're sitting into a lecture, which feels like preparing people for a society that is almost incongruent to the society that we're exposed to, of people in bars drunkenly, you know, watching lovers as they make out on a park bench, recounting their own loves, and right. There's this like, this is the way that we train our children to be, versus like, this is the way that we act out in the world.
Yeah. Well, and every parent's goal is to make sure that their children do better than they did, that they don't make the same mistakes. And so there's that, which also comes back to this cyclical nature of saying, well, if Joyce is HCE and the Sean and Shem are Joyce's kids, Joyce's anxiety for what they would wind up being, and they really had a hard, rough go of it as they went around. I mean, I think generally the things that we do to adjust the development of children will mess them up in a different way.
100%.
Yeah. So if you lean too far the other side, and you get that sense that these, if HC and ALP are Adam and Eve, then Sean and Shem are Cain and Abel, and what does that mean? In terms of how they behave, the burden of being children of greatness. It's. And then being able to sort of spend some time with the games and into the lessons, and then into the drunken inn where the kids aren't really involved. There's that sort of progression that's quite interesting.
Yeah, even with the kids not involved, it feels like the latter half of book two is they continue to badmouth HCE, but also like a search for nostalgia and remembrance of youth and
Mm,
love, right?
yeah.
The whole Tristan and Isolde section is, people being like, he reminds me of this thing,
Yes.
of this mythical love, which also reminds me of this time that I had a mythical love,
Mhm.
um, and so and also the way that 2-3 is structured, we talked about that cascading of voices. Feels very playground. Feels like
Right.
HCE. HCE get. He's like bars closed. HCE gets bullied so hard.
But leading up to that, you've been hearing the story of the Norwegian captain, and you've been hearing their story. All these different tales where everyone's regaling each other with these tales. Again, all memories, all reminiscences of maybe better times or times of heroism, and generally within those, the stories are being embellished and being they're quite selective, and then there's
Yeah.
commentary from the audience is coming through, which also then extends from the night lessons, which is all about the commentary that's in margins.
Hmm.
And so we get a sort of a parallel between the annotations in the notebook where they're making fun of what's happening in the class, compared to someone who's telling a story, and the other people who are on the side interjecting with sassy comments. It's really, yeah, and while reading it, it's kind of hard to see it. It's one of those, um,
We're in the trees, right? We're
yeah,
like, I can't tell you the shape of this forest right now. I
yeah,
can't tell you what tree I'm climbing. Just know I'm holding on to bark, hoping to get to the next branch.
yeah. It's but sort of making a lot. It makes a lot of sense when you sort of stop a little bit to think about it. I mean, this was in terms of chapters, this is a much shorter book than book one. But in terms of pages, and so book one is 213 pages, book two is 186, but book two felt like a lot longer.
Listen, book two made you fight for every page.
Yeah,
I'm sure he squeezed more words in this 186 that were on those
yeah.
213.
Well, it's interesting. I think I remember. I mean, if we did a little research, we could probably discover this, but we're not going to. Is that Lucy, our friend Lucy, said in her section, when she read at the beginning of book two, she said that she believed the book two was written last, and that it was slotted in between book one and three. Purists, don't hold me to that one, because that may or may not be true, or I may be misremembering what Lucy said, but it didn't feel as though it followed directly on from book one. It really felt
No.
as though it was something that was written and then placed here. And has a very challenging chapter. Or book. I mean, it may or may not be the most challenging in the book, but I think maybe we're close.
Yeah, I mean, the Herculean task of, and I applaud you, listeners. If you don't know, what Toby did to prepare us for night lessons was nothing short of a miracle, and I know it took him a lot of time. I will also say that Toby likes to take these impossible Sisyphean things, and he just like breaks the boulder open, and he's like, "What do you mean it was hard?" So he's like, "Rock, hill, whatever." Um,
Yeah.
but even just looking at that broken down in a very contemporary sort of way that we look at text, I was like,
Mhm.
"This is crazy."
Yeah.
Like this, it felt unwieldy at times, and I thought about like just the minute per page that if I was reading this silently, that I would have taken in night lessons alone, right? Normally, especially when Taylor and I are reading a book together, we kind of like pace set with each other. Like, what
Mhm.
page are you on? Oh, um, but night lessons feels like if you wanted to, you could spend weeks just being like, which annotation on the left ties into the line in the middle section, which ties into the annotation at the bottom, and
Mhm.
how, like, what are those things? And it's actually the first time that it felt like this whole book has felt like a dare from Joyce to be like, figure out what's happening.
Yeah.
But it's the first time that it felt like, I'm going to give you a structure that is academically set up to aid in your comprehension and then spit on you the entire time because good luck, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Do you think, oh, there's a diagram. The diagram will help me. And of course not.
The reason we have annotations in books is to say, like, what is that word? Okay, here's the history of that word so that way I can go in with further understanding. And we read those annotations and we were like, less. I know less.
Yeah, absolutely. And there was certain, when I was listening back to that one, there were certain ones where in the last 2 pages of that section of the final part of Night Lessons, he has references, and then in the margins he sort of mentions which legendary figure he's talking about. So Nero, Oedipus, whatever, Adam, whatever thing. And I was listening to that, and I tried really hard to sort of link it up so that the annotation matched to the phrase or the whatever it is, a reference to Rome burning, and I was like, oh, that's Nero. Okay, I'm going to put that in there. But I just listening back, I was like, oh, I missed a handful of them. Hearing it, going, oh, that reference is actually supposed to be over here with this one, and it's one of those things that Joyce isn't very interested in giving us a helping hand.
No. No, he as a matter of fact, he was like, you want to hold my hand? Funny. Here's a hot brand. Enjoy it.
Yeah.
Keep reading.
Yeah. I think it's something that makes it almost like a multimedia piece. It's almost like that mixed media. Do you remember that J.J. Abrams book that came out called S? It was a sort of a it's the ship of Theseus kind of concept. And then it was all these notes, and the marginalia is the point, and there's lots of different kinds of things. You have to sort of spend time looking at the annotations to figure out the identity of the author and the secret of the things, and there's all this loose supplementary material that's tucked in between the pages, and I am totally paraphrasing this directly from the Wikipedia page, but written by Doug Dorst, conceived by J.J. Abrams, and it's one of those things where it's supposed to be difficult to get into. It's not unlike the Cain's Jawbone in some ways, but this S, it's sort of designed to sort of say this is something that existed before, and then the annotations are what we've written into it.
I have a friend who has read that book.
Okay.
And I love this friend dearly. Also, he's all the books he read are the most esoteric literary acts of masturbation I've ever heard him explain to me. So,
yeah. So, well, some people are into that kind of thing. I mean, the thing that makes me think of, though, which is maybe a little bit more up our alley, is Night Lessons the literary equivalent to Sleep No More?
Oh.
The stage adaptation of Hitchcock's films, and also Macbeth, performed in.
I think I'm picking up what you're putting down. Yeah, because the understanding is, if I get a textbook or a notebook with a lesson in it, I should be able to read just the text from the publisher.
Right.
And get something from it. In the same way that if I get a used textbook and I'm like, I'm just going to read I'm interested in what they're writing in the margins, and that tells a completely different story.
Yeah.
It is kind of like a choose your own adventure sort of thing where you could just run through it. And as a matter of fact, even in the editing of the book, the annotations are probably some of the smallest annotations I've ever seen. So like, again, it's additional work for I'm completely guilty of the thing where I'm like, those annotations are way too small. I will only look at them if I absolutely need them.
Right.
So again, it's a self-election into that part of the story.
Yeah, and well, I mean, and the reason why that Sleep No More is sort of interesting to me is because there is so much paratextual information that's available within that piece. If anyone who's listening hasn't isn't familiar with it, it's an immersive installation theatre piece that was performed in New York City by Punchdrunk, which was this immersive theatre company. I don't believe it's still running, but
I think it finally closed.
Yeah. Hi everyone, Toby here. Just interjecting a little bit here in this episode to say that Sleep No More is still currently running in New York City up until the 20th of November 2024. So if you are in the area, make sure you get along to see this amazing production. It's really worth your time. Okay, back to the show. But it was essentially in a purpose-built warehouse, which was the warehouse performed as the McKittrick Hotel, which was this old-time hotel. And when you book a ticket, you don't actually buy a ticket; you book into the hotel, and then you come in and you're a guest in the hotel, and you're given a playing card that tells and that playing card dictates where you are supposed to enter the space. And it's essentially an immersive space where there is a performance happening around you, but you have to go find it, and then you have to dig around within the drawers and read the books and look at all the different kinds of things to get any kind of meaning from it, and secret spaces, and it rewards inquiry, which I think is exactly what Finnegans Wake does. It rewards that kind of inquiry. And so you could read Finnegans Wake literally, and I think the people who try to read Finnegans Wake literally fail and quit quickly, and for good reason, because it's not designed to be read that way. But if it's about sort of stopping and trying to sort of to illuminate what's happening in each section, and we get that behind the scenes look with Night Lessons, where we get a little bit of this annotation that Joyce is giving us. I don't know. I mean, I saw Sleep No More twice, and it was some of the most intense and fulfilling theatrical experiences of my life, of being,
because you worked for it.
Yeah, absolutely worked for it, and just discovering the space and discovering what was in there. And I still have right here next to my desk my Sleep No More content, all the material that I collected over my time within the space, including my playing card that got me into the door.
That's awesome.
Yeah. And the reason why it was so good that when I went the second time is I was in the line outside, and the usher came up to me and said, "Have you been here before?" And I said, "Yes." And she said, "Do you want to come with me?" And I said, "Yes." And so she took me through a side door, and we went in, and there's no time now to describe what we went through, but we were given a key and a map and told to go and discover other, and so it was incredible sort of stuff. But I knew a lot of people who saw Sleep No More who hated it because they went in and said, "Where is the play? Show me the play.
Right.
I want to sit down in a chair and someone to play the play for me." And that's
which is not what that is.
And so if you try to sort of sit down and say, "Oh, the play," and so sometimes actors would come into a room and they'd perform a scene or a dance, and you go, "Oh, wonderful, I like that dance." But you're not doing it right. You're in this space. Everyone is wearing a mask. Anyone who's not wearing a mask is an actor. And so you have to go find the performance, and then you have to piece it together because you're seeing it in a non-linear form. And so, and then there's all these additional quests where you can go in and find secret doors and things like that. And that's, it's astonishing. It's incredible. And I feel as though there's a lot that Finnegans Wake shares with Sleep No More.
Yeah, I think it's the while we were talking, I was also doing just some preliminary reviews and looking at S and stuff like that, right? Where and trying to make parallels between S and Finnegans Wake and Sleep No More and stuff like that. I think that from what I'm able to ascertain is that the thing that people praise in S is the experience of the book. They're like, the story's okay.
Right.
You know what I mean? They're like, the story's okay. And they're like, it's really about the effort that you had to put in to get to the story that people, they're like, the concept is great. The story's okay. Feels very J.J. Abrams.
Right.
But the thing that I'm starting to really appreciate about Finnegans Wake is that in book one, we're like, we are working in for what,
Mm-hmm.
And now, um, the poetry of it's really starting to stick out. The singing of it's really starting to stick out. The fact that I have any sort of emotional reaction at all to what characters are being asked to do is really starting to like show that, oh yeah, there's something to this book. Um, and I'm we use it as a resource, and I love that we use it as a resource. But I'm gonna say, like, I almost feel like Oxford World Classic underplays what happens in these chapters.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like it's the log line of those pages
Right.
as opposed to leaning it. Like, I'm super interested, and it won't be us. It definitely won't be me, but I'm super interested if someone goes through and being like, and this is like, sure, it's the drunken people talking about HCE, but
Right.
like, this is what they're saying, you
Yeah.
know? And, but I also am feeling that I'm at the point where whenever we finish reading and we sit through and we do, you and I both do the thing where we take a moment where we just look back and be like, what the hell happened?
Yeah.
And we're able to find those little nuggets that just leap out on the page. Uh, it is the story coming through in a way that again proves that it's not just concept over content. You know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. 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 Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, I don't know if you have a one of those chapters, Night Games, Night Lessons, Tales, or Tristan, that stood out to you as being your
I
favorite.
you, I really enjoyed Tristan
Mm-hmm.
because I liked it felt like the most camaraderie
Right.
in the whole entire book, and just like oh yeah, there's these five guys and they did this thing, and like, oh yeah, what happened to him again, like
Yeah.
that sort of element with, oh yeah, we're not talking about them right now, we're watching these two, and this is what he should do. Oh wait, but let's go back to like the journey that that whole thing I thought was, or was that Tales from the End? I can't remember,
Yeah. Yeah.
but whichever one was about, like, yeah, and we went to war and we did this thing,
Yeah.
like, I
Yeah.
thought that was really great. Night Lessons, it was a combination of the density of that chapter, and listeners should know we recorded all like 4.5 hours of that book,
Yeah.
like, in one go.
Yep.
So that was the biggest push that we've done. um but also, so for me, I think it's kind of bookend and Tristan and Isolde and Night Games, with Tales at the end and a very close second if those two are tied, and then
Mm-hmm.
Night Lessons in third, partially because of the physical demand that was there, and also because I feel like it's the one where it has the most to mine,
Right.
and it's the one that I'm like, I feel like I extrapolated the least from.
Yeah. Yeah. You really, yeah, like I keep saying, you really feel as though that's one that's going to reward you, and then it just says you're not ready.
Yeah.
Come back later. Well, I mean, Neil tells the story of his friend who spent his entire career on 8 pages of night lessons, and
Yes.
I hope he got something out of it. I mean, that's the thing. It's always the giant tragedy of people who do. I mean, if it's PhDs or writing a book or whatever, but that is such a long and lonely process that all you hope is that, oh, geez, I hope you got a degree from that, or I hope you got a book publication, even if no one read the book. Because,
Yeah.
if you slog away like that and then, yeah, it was all for, I don't know. I mean, I'm sure that man also doesn't want any pity. I'm sure he thoroughly
He chose
enjoyed.
it. He
Yeah,
chose this life.
absolutely. I think often about the quotation of why Finnegans Wake and his response of what else is there. I think of it often.
Not gonna lie, I can think of a list, but
Yeah, but this in terms of something that's going to be perennially challenging. I think, I mean, because I love the works of Shakespeare. I'll never suggest that I have mastered the works of Shakespeare, not even scratch the surface of being close to starting to master the works of Shakespeare as both an actor and as a dramaturg and as an academic. And I've hit it in multiple different ways. But I also kind of, in many ways, I know enough about Shakespeare now that I can put Shakespeare aside and still be pretty good with Shakespeare
right.
indefinitely, right? And so I can still consider myself a Shakespearean, even though I haven't really been a Shakespearean in anger for a while. Um, And I'm currently writing a book on Romeo and Juliet and performance, but that's by the by. Yeah, that's forthcoming in something like 2028 or something. So don't hold your breath on that one.
I mean, but at the same time, it's part of the reason why you and I clicked on an artistic level, because when I brought you my plays, I was like, I don't need someone who can tell me like about who's someone who's like, this is realistic. I was like, I need someone who understands the way that poetic language and heightened language can influence and tell a story
right.
in a way that Shakespearean writing does. And I was like, oh yeah, no, this makes sense to me.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Which is why you sent me a video first, a DVD of
Passing Strange
to make sure that I was on the right page.
I was like, this is what I want to do.
And again, it's interesting, the sensibility of something like Passing Strange, which doesn't go the easy route, and Stu has every opportunity in Passing Strange to take the easy road and to say, I'm just going to make a musical about my life and how I came to be here. But he never takes that easy road, and he's just, and so that ran on Broadway and failed fairly spectacularly in not very long, because it was hard.
Yeah.
And very much like Finnegans Wake failed spectacularly during Joyce's lifetime and even afterwards, because it was hard, and no one wants hard.
What's funny is that there's talk of a remount of Passing Strange with ART.
Right.
And the people who got Passing Strange have championed this musical like no other.
Right.
And it is very much like a Finnegans Wake type of thing. It's funny because when I always get asked the question first day of classes, or whenever I'm in a room full of other theater artists and they say, what's your favorite show, and I say Passing Strange, I get two kinds of reactions, and they're almost like the reactions when people say Finnegans Wake is their favorite book. I get one where it's like, I keep hearing that, I've never seen it, and I know I should.
Right.
Or, isn't that the most brilliant thing you've ever seen?
Yeah. And just like Finnegans Wake, just like Sleep No More, Passing Strange breaks the format.
Destroys it.
And it says, this format you like, that's cute. I'm going to go over here and do this. And we come in, and I guarantee you had a theater on Broadway full of German tourists saying, we're going to go see a musical. It's Sound of Music, right? And then you sit down and you watch Passing Strange, which is more of a rock show, and then it's psychedelic, and then it's non-linear and
metaphysical, and this,
and then I mean, maybe Germans would have liked it because there is projected sections in German.
There is, and a lot of existentialism, but
and it just sort of makes me think of like the Berliner Ensemble and the stuff that they're doing, the way that they sort of take and fracture the classics, like the way that they messed with the sonnet cycle and things like. It's we get so ensconced in our comfort zone that when things are hard, we want to quit. And I love that I got you on board and turned this into a podcast so that I couldn't quit. Because honestly, I mean, you saying that you and Taylor read novels in a parallel and you're pacing each other. If it was Finnegans Wake, reading silently side by side,
we both be like, guess what we're not doing?
Yeah, exactly. Because it's supposed to be rewarding. And the rewarding part here for me has been, we get to the end of book 2, which is maybe the hardest book in the novel, although book 3 is going to say, hold my beer. I'm sure we're going to get into book 3 and we're like, remember when we thought book 2 was hard? But at least what's rewarding is being able to talk about it like this and to sort of be able to share this discovery and share it with each other, but also share it with our listeners who we love, and help other people through this thicket of trees that we can't see the forest of yet. I mean, there's a I'm never going to regret having done this, and we've only got another 11 episodes left.
Which is crazy.
Yeah, 11 more reading episodes, and then a final, like a wrap up, but 11 more sections. So yeah, we should. I mean, we're in episode 27 now. So with 2 other summary sections, we will be done by episode 40. And I'm almost grieving it already because I love it, and I love the connection that we've been able to make with this work. And a lot of people have asked, okay, what's the next book? And I think I mentioned in my first episode that my inspiration for this was Michael Ian Black's Obscure, and just remains one of my favorite podcasts. And Michael is very kind to me. We've connected a few times through the Patreon, and he's a very he promoted the podcast, and I didn't quite have the guts to ask him to guest on the podcast. He's probably not going to do that. He's on a show on CNN these days, so he's pretty busy. But what he did was he read Obscure, Jude the Obscure, for his first season, and it was really great. And then he came back for a second season. He did Frankenstein, and then he did Wuthering Heights and American Tragedy, and it's never been the same. It's been good, but it also feels like he's obliged to continue. As opposed to just making it finite. And so I feel fairly strongly about making this finite. And, TJ and I will come back and do another podcast on another topic, but some other time. But I don't think there's a benefit to saying, now we're going to read Ulysses, or now we're going to read, I don't know, going into something else. Now we're going to read Faulkner.
No, we're not.
Let's do the Sound and the Fury.
No,
thank you. Yeah, I've read The Sound and the Fury, and I got to the end of that, and I was like, "Well, that was an ordeal."
I felt the same way. That was one of those books that I was forced to read in high school, and I was like,
high school,
bruh." Would I tell you I read Frankenstein in 8th grade? I should not have.
No,
you know what I mean?
Yeah.
In the same way that what else? I read The Awakening sophomore year of high school, and I was like, this woman is fully having an orgasm with the ocean, right? Like, this is what's happening. And my teacher was like, yes. And I'm like, I am 15 years old.
Yeah.
Like, no, I don't understand her depression around her kept life in New England. I don't get it.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. So, but yeah, I don't think there is a season 2 of Wake, because I mean, you can just keep going around and around in circles and doing Wake again, but no one wants that. I mean, we don't want to go back and start reading over again. No one wants to listen to that. And I think just being able to put a pin in it is a good thing. But
it's the BBC way of making television. We made our season. Thank you so much.
That's it. And just let it be out there. And the fact that we are 27 episodes into recording Finnegans Wake is an achievement in itself.
Yes.
It doesn't need to be listed in the works cited list of future Finnegans Wake scholars, because I don't think we're saying anything particularly insightful, but I think
it will be.
Well, I think what we're doing, if nothing else, is we're amplifying Finnegans Wake, and we're exposing people to it, and we're showing that it is accessible, and we're having fun with it. And I think a lot of people will listen and will be shocked and horrified with our mistreatment of the words, and I don't really care about that. But
that'll be fine.
Yeah, that's it. But there's another version. There's another podcast out there, which I've talked about before, by One Little Goat Theatre Company, are doing this podcast, which is connected to their film version of Finnegans Wake. They're filming these readings, and I'm thrilled to say that next week, a week from tomorrow, I'm going to see a live recording of Chapter 1-5.
That's awesome.
Yeah, and so I'm a little unsure as to how, whether or not they know I'm coming. I registered under my own name, and Richard Hart, who is the actor who reads Finnegans Wake for One Little Goat, he follows us on Instagram, so they know we exist. And I don't know, I might go in there anonymous with just a hat pulled down over my eyes. But they also have an exhibition of Finnegans Wake materials, because it's being held at the Thomas Fisher Rare Book Library at University of Toronto, which includes Northrop Frye, the great English scholar who was a University of Toronto professor. He has his annotated edition of Finnegans Wake in there in the library. So there's going to be a little exhibition, and I'll be putting that all over our Instagram. But yeah, so I'm looking forward to that. Looking forward to hearing Richard do it, and Richard does it beautifully. Richard, it's funny and it's personable, and he's got the right accent, and it's great. And I think that would probably be the podcast of record when it comes to a version of Finnegans Wake, and I'm pleased to allow them to have that mantle. But the fact that we are able to be here and join the conversation and have other people listening, I couldn't be happier. I think that's great. And we've been able to have all these great guests on. We had my kids and your fiance and a whole bunch of my old students, and it's
great.
Yeah, we met Lucy Brazier, who's fantastic, and she's going to be on next week's episode. Finding a way to get more people to know about Neil Wexler that's part of my
your life
goals these days. Is always just making sure that more people know about Neil Wexler. Hi Neil, we know he's listening, and he's going to come on a couple more times before we finish, because he brings so much class to the table.
Well, to further prove the fact that, and not to take away anything you said about anyone else's work, I asked ChatGPT to identify a Finnegans Wake podcast. Our name came up, and I said, tell me more about Wake the Podcast. And it says, Wake the Podcast is dedicated to exploring James Joyce's Finnegans Wake. The podcast takes a deep delve into the text, breaking it down chapter by chapter and discussing its complex themes, language, and narrative style. Hosts often invite guests, including scholars and Joyce enthusiasts, to share their insights and interpretations, making the material accessible to both seasoned readers and newcomers. The podcast aims to illuminate the intrinsic nature of the work, fostering a deeper understanding of Joyce's unique style and contributions to literature. If you're interested in the challenges and beauty of Finnegans Wake, this podcast is a great resource.
Oh my goodness.
Thank you, Google. Thank you, Microsoft, for your...
Wow, you just need to screen cap that and either send it to me or stick it on your Instagram or something, because I think this is the sort of thing that if ChatGPT thinks it's true, like all of our students at school, then it must be right. Amazing. And it reminds me, though, I love that. I mean, obviously that's building on the fact that stuff's out there. So it's good to know that at least AI thinks. A couple of weeks ago, we had Jackie Mahoney, one of my former students, on, and she was talking about how they were talking about their thesis that they did for their master's program, where they fed information into AI to figure out what it thought of Finnegans Wake, and so they had made a bot to give insight into the text. So Jackie texted me and said, I don't know if you're interested, but I'm going to ask, feed AI a diet entirely of this book to see what comes out. And they said that when they did their thesis, they were using information on Joe Bonga's writing, so they called it the Joe bot. So Jackie's dubbed this next bot Finnegans Fake.
I love that.
And so I think when Jackie does come up with the output from Finnegans Fake, we're going to have them back on the podcast to go through this sort of stuff. Because I mean, the way that we're interacting with a text, like ChatGPT says, it is accessible, and we're opening things up. So
I love it.
Yeah. Yeah, it's great. Look, I am just thrilled to always have a chance to hang out with you. You're harder and harder to get to pin down because you're a busy man. But I understand. But that's for a good reason, because you're busy changing lives.
That's that end of school. You know, the further into the semester you get, the more complicated life becomes.
Yeah. And then I just got a new job, so so I'm now working 1.5 full-time jobs. So that's also making time a little bit difficult to nail down. But I think we are able to. And obviously there's no secret that we stack up podcasts. We record them in short amount of time and then release them weekly. So This is why the dates don't always line up and things like that. But look, I really appreciate you all for listening and for listening to our recap, which didn't recap a lot, but we did talk a lot about a lot of things. That is all the time we have this week for Wake. We'll return next week to start in on book 3, where the attention turns directly to Sean the Postman. I've been Toby Malone, joined as ever by TJ Young, bidding farewell to book 2 and charging into the next difficulty. See you next week, people who listen to the recap but not the other episodes.
It's so good.
This has been Wake, a cold reading of James Joyce's Finnegans Wake, just to hear it out loud. If you've made it this far, thank you for your dedication. Join us next week for another segment of Finnegans Wake and a chat about what we've found. Wake is a Moon Street Media podcast, engineered by TJ Young and Toby Malone. Our theme song is The Ballad of Perso Riley, arranged and performed by Meg Logue after James Joyce. Wake is recorded in Canada, where Finnegans Wake is in the public domain. For community and bonus content, join us at our free Patreon at patreon.com/wakepod. If you have questions about Finnegans Wake, don't ask us. We're just as confused as you are. See you next week.